And welcome everybody to the 31st episode of the #InvestThis podcast. I am your host, Scott Bauer. And today, blessed to have Justin Grimes here with us from Texas. Justin, how you doing?
Yeah, good, Scott. Thanks a lot for having me on. Appreciate it.
Very welcome. A little bit about Justin. He was born and raised just south of Houston, Texas. We're still actively investing. He's committed to maintaining multiple streams of income. Super smart. And is currently an active rehabber and mortgage note creator, a passive commercial real estate investor, an investor operator in online businesses, and an equity partner and employee in an oil field equipment company. So interested to talk about that. Justin and his wife, Brittany, have 2 baby boys. So that's quite the little resume to get you started there, man.
Yeah, it's a lot to juggle. So I'm learning as I go and making it work.
Right. Well, why don't you give the listeners, I gave them a little bit of info, but why don't you dive a little bit deeper into what it is that you're doing, what you're focused on, and talk about that for a minute.
Sure. I appreciate that. So my first property that I picked up, it was kind of maybe by accident. In 2007, I purchased a condo just south of Houston on the water, sweet view. And it was a cool bachelor pad really for 5 years or so. So then I met my wife and we decided to buy a house. So I said, well, I'll give this a shot. Why not? I can buy the house, keep this on the side and have some good write-offs. So that went well, for a while, but it was passive, but pretty consistently, when the AC goes out, I'll wipe out the cash flow of 3 years or something. It was it was sickening when it would happen. So, it was good for the tax write-offs with a W-2 income, that's for sure. So it served a purpose. The catalyst that kind of got me more active and passionate about financial freedom and cash flowing assets, and things like that it occurred in 2016. My dad was on his way home from work and was killed in an auto accident.
Oh my gosh.
Sorry. So a tragic event in our life, obviously. Wow. And, I've always kind of been the, I don't know if the right word's caretaker, but somebody in my family who kind of steps up and makes sure everybody's good, gonna make it all right. So what we did, my mom's a retired school teacher. From that accident, we're able to, fortunately or unfortunately, invest some money. I didn't know anything better than to just put it in the stock markets and bonds and things. I had a buddy at Merrill Lynch, and so there we went. Yeah. So, but over time, over the past few years, what we've done is peeled that off into little tranches of multifamily. We've done just commercial syndications from a passive perspective, multifamily, self-storage, and mobile home parks, which are all, have their own, kind of just nuances and things like that. And then through that as well, I've created a note creation company that basically we rehab homes and owner finance them to people using private money lending and things like that. So I know that's a mouthful, but that's kind of how it went and where I'm at right now.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, that is a lot of different stuff. And you also mentioned that you're working in a W-2 job.
Right.
Talk about that for a second.
Yeah, sure. So I have a equity stake there. I've been there about 12 years and we're continuing to grow. We're in the oil and gas industry down here in Houston, Texas. So my skill set and career has been compliance, and through real estate, there's other skill sets that are required in real estate. I just don't thrive well at them. So what I did was find a business partner that did. So on the note side, I do compliance, structuring the note with a legal perspective and making sure that we're up to par with all the regulatory requirements. But that's, so I work from about, 7 to 4. At that job, I come home for a couple hours to be with the kids. They go down about 6 if we're lucky. And then, I eat dinner with my wife and relax a bit, but then whatever time, the 8 to 11 or 12 comes job. Yeah. So
on to the next thing. Then you're because it looks like you also have the Cashflow Hustle podcast yourself.
I do.
I'm sure
Yeah.
you're working on that as well. So
right.
you got a lot, you're handling a lot of different things, man. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I want to back up just a little bit because
Sure.
there's a lot of time between 2007 and 2016 when, you bought your first investment property and then you got married and so you moved in with your wife. And so what happened in that gap?
Yeah. I
there was a crash in the gap. So what happened there?
Yeah. So that thing, the real estate wise did what it did. I didn't really have any particular interest in it. And I never really took the time to reflect on long-term what I was looking for later in life, is from passive cash flow. And, I went to school at night then, so I'm always busy. So I got my MBA in the evening at the University of Houston while I was working and traveling a lot. So, my scope of work at the W-2 job has changed a bit where I'm not traveling as much, which helps a lot with the family. That's what I did. I graduated with that MBA in 15.
Okay.
So that took a couple of 3 years.
So you graduated in 2015 with the MBA. So did you end up losing that first investment property that you got in 2007 in the crash or letting it go, or did you keep it?
Yeah, we ended up letting it go basically with the maintenance fees, I guess you'd call it, monthly maintenance fees on a condo with the association. It wipe out all the cash flow. So in essence, when I really started looking at the numbers, I'd be breaking even at best to hold on to it and getting some tax deduction, but zero cash flow. So, it just didn't align with my goals as I really started to take a look and interest in what my next steps in life would be and long-term, and really kind of pull my head out and come up with a plan. I was just kind of floating around, doing what you do, what you're taught
That's
to
how you
do.
learn though, right? I mean, that's how you learn. You go through those different events in your life, and that's how you learn. So
Sure.
Glad that you kind of have navigated out of that and then got to where you're at now. So you're definitely an overachiever. If I'm talking about somebody that is out there that's very on point with what you're doing with your life, you clearly are that, right? You went to school, you got married. Now you got how many kids do you have?
Two, a 2-month-old and a 2-year-old. So
okay, so your hands are tied on that just alone. But you managed to go get your MBA at night. You work a W-2 job and then come home at night and spend some time with your wife before going back to work. You can only get probably 5-6 hours of sleep.
I get a little bit more, but it's it's not any more than, I don't know, 7 or 8. So
right. And that's fantastic to hear that. But I want to dive into all the different sides of real estate that you're working in now, because you had mentioned that you're able to put some money into the real estate from your dad, that happening, and now you have some mobile home parks and the multifamily. And so break down to each one of those. What does that mean?
Okay, so given the volume of other stuff I'm involved in, my participation in those asset classes is completely passive. So what I did was basically listen and read and just try to find who those players in each particular space are that seem to be making waves, and begin to build a relationship with those people, and then through time meet them and kind of learn what they're all about, what their goals are, how they would align ultimately with my family's goals, which is to provide a retirement income for my mother while protecting that capital. So those are, I approach them similarly. They're all three very unique asset classes, but from an operator standpoint, I'm pretty clear on what I'm looking for. Happy to talk through that, but it comes down to trust and alignment of interest ultimately.
So ultimately it's partnering and putting all the work in somebody else's hands and being very passive with it, right? Mm-hmm. That takes trust, and that also takes kind of knowing what you're doing a little bit, right? Because you really need to feel comfortable putting that in somebody else's hands.
I do, yeah. So I look at it as I'm investing with my mom's money from a terrible accident. So last thing I want to do is
screw that up, right?
Screw that up. Yeah. So not to put additional pressure on me, but I absolutely take it very seriously and, I'm careful with it.
Well, and I think that's also a very important point for all the listeners out there, that you can't want to do everything yourself. You do have to rely on partnerships, and you should not just be a one-man show for everything. Maybe I'm a big proponent on focus on what you're good at and outsource the rest, because you're going to get a lot more done and accomplish a lot more faster that way than if you try to do everything yourself. So what does the partnerships or the agreements with the other people that you're in these deals with look like? Are they strictly managers? Do they have an equity piece? How does that look?
Okay. Let's talk on multifamily. I'm just simply a limited partner in those deals, getting a preferred return and then equity split at the end.
Yep.
Those are all structured the same. So right now there's 4 different groups that we invest in. Initially I got involved in one, and we invested geographically in very similar location. And as we talked as a family, it kind of came down fundamentally to diversification of our risk profile. So to have all of our eggs in one basket didn't make sense. To have all of our eggs in one zip code, didn't make sense. So we're spread out quite well on the real estate piece. And as far as the note creation business goes, so I did try and do it all on my own with my wife. I'd say at the very beginning, we took on a flip, and it was a freaking nightmare. I was traveling a lot for work. She's raising a baby. We're trying to juggle contractors, and it was a circus, man. So, I really got down on myself and was like, man, this just may not be for me, kind of thing. So, since that time I've kind of regrouped and built a team out, with advisors, coaches, business partners. So my business partner on that deal, she's a licensed realtor in the Houston market that does this full time, runs 2 crews, and she handles the day-to-day butt kicking on that thing. And I help raise the capital from private financing. I have some banking relationships with lines of credit. And then on the compliance end with the back is kind of where I fill in when I'm not at work.
Right. That's huge. So, and I guess for the listeners out there, a note business basically, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're buying a property, you renovate it. Now all of a sudden you sell the note, or basically become the bank for the end user.
That's right. So our model is to partner with a investor that wants basically a preferred return, but ultimately it's a first lien in the physical asset. We hold a second lien, and we put a buyer in there. So how we make our money is a buyer comes to buy $100,000 property. They put 20% down, and we carry a note for $80,000. So that $20,000 goes to me and my partner. And then additionally, there's a spread in the interest rate that my lender is charging me versus what I'm charging the buyer. So there's a small thing. The beautiful thing with notes, I think, is you're not getting that call, as cliche as it may be. You're not getting wiped out by CapEx stuff, the toilets and the ACs and the floods or any of that. When my toilet breaks, I gotta fix it, man. I can't call the bank.
Right. No, yeah, being the bank is phenomenal. Nobody calls. I mean, you don't call the bank when your stuff breaks, just like you said. So that's huge.
Yep.
As far as the real estate stuff goes, the mobile home park, self-storage, and multifamily, you're just passive on all those?
I am. So my goal long-term, as time frees up and life does what it does, I'd like to get more active in those. But realistically, at this point, I can't see myself adding any value to a team. I wouldn't feel right about it, trying to take a more active role in an investment. We could bring some capital, but there's no way I could carry my weight. I don't feel like, you know what I mean?
You don't have the time to do so? Is that what you mean? You don't have the time to?
Yeah. So I'm a pretty big on scheduling and, time management and things like that. It's been a process to get to that way, but realistically, yeah, I mean, there's only so much time in the evening for me to sleep. So I've got to do some.
And that's huge. That's exactly right. Only 24 hours in a day. Right. So earlier in the call here, you'd mentioned that you talked about kind of what you want and what you're looking for. Why don't you explain that a little bit?
In life, as it goes?
As far as in life, or what the investments, what you want them to do for you, or kind of whatever you meant by that.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, ultimately, so we'll segment it two ways. One for the multifamily stuff or the syndications and things is to get up to basically where my mom's income is passive on those preferred returns that she's getting on a monthly or quarterly basis, that she doesn't need any other retirement income to supplement that. So, like I said, she's a retired teacher, and there's some she has benefits and some things like that. But basically, to just replace that altogether, so she can really do what she wants. My brother, I have a brother who's a little younger than me, and we tell her, I mean, you can't take it with you, so enjoy it. So she's got some Astros tickets, and she travels with her friends. We try and help her enjoy that stuff while she can.
Absolutely.
So that's a big goal for us.
You gotta enjoy life, man. I mean, it's so short. It's so short.
Yep. No, no greater way to realize that than to go through a tragedy like that. And I know there's plenty of listeners out there who've been through something similar.
Right.
On the note business, so our goal this year, I talked to a guy the other day. His goal was to get 50 notes created this year, which is awesome. Ours is 7. So
quite a difference there.
Yeah. But, so we're both, we're go-getters, but we're not trying to hit a home run every deal. I mean, we're super, I don't know if risk averse is the right word, but we're definitely measured on our risk. So we're not going to go stick our neck out and get 4 deals going when we can only manage 2 crews, So that's the goal. Ultimately from that, the goal is to create right now 25 mortgage notes that are simply cash flowing. There's a couple of different ways, that those things can cash flow from, just having an investor involved in an interest only payment for a term of the loan. There's ways to structure those things where you can mimic, if it's a 15-year amortized schedule, I can carry a note with my lender the same as my buyer.
Mm-hmm.
And then alternately, if I had, let's say, a 15-year amortized schedule, I could sell to an investor maybe the first 10 years of that, and he'd make a good return on his investment, and I'd keep the last 5 years, which, there's at 5 years on a 15-year amortized schedule, there's still $50,000 left to be made, and that thing's all cash flow to me.
Right.
So that's the model, is kind of segmenting that up and having a couple of different triggers that'll send a payday one day. I mean, reality is people don't keep their mortgage for 15 years. I think the average is 7. So we try and set it up where we're cash flowing while everything's going, and the investors or the buyers, that is, when their credit's right or things turn around for them, if they want to refinance and move along, there's no penalty. Just pay down the debt and let's move on.
Are these single family homes that you're doing?
These are, yeah. So these are all single family. So you're talking after repair value of $120,000 and under, which in Houston, there's a fair amount of inventory.
Okay.
At that price point.
Okay.
Yep.
Here in Phoenix, those are far and few between, man. I'll tell you
what.
I
believe it. Yeah. Some people I tell that to, they're like, man, that wouldn't buy you a parking spot. Yeah.
So, I mean, what about the regulations when it comes to that? And we can just touch on that really, really quick.
You bet.
Are there a lot of regulations when you're trying to put notes on properties like that? You had mentioned earlier that you're all about regulation and making sure that you're up to par that way.
Yeah. So the way we operate is through a loan originator that's licensed.
Okay.
And then a servicer, a loan servicer. That was the piece I was
trying to understand, as if that was you or...
No, so those guys do the underwriting, the preparation of the documentation, and we have a lawyer draw up all the documentation for the actual creation of the mortgage. So those are just part of the team members. And then once that's all done, a loan servicer collects the monthly payments. We collect in a separate escrow account the taxes and insurance. They handle all of that tax documentation at the end of the year. And, if there is the need to ultimately foreclose on a property or something, all that stuff has to be done through those licensed individuals. We can't get involved in that. So those are obviously critical team members. And I think probably to people who aren't familiar with notes, there's a lot of just unknowns out there, but there's ways to do it, and just a matter of kind of being resourceful and putting a team together and then letting it rock and roll.
Right. And even, I mean, shoot, we're in the information age, right? You can type pretty much anything you want to into Google, and it'll spit out the answer just like that. What a great time to be alive, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Spoiled.
What would you say is the biggest obstacle that you've had to kind of overcome in your journey so far in this investment space, being, having all your hands in these? And that could be a tough question, but.
No, I think, so I was super confident that I could do a flip by myself and manage all the other stuff, and to not have a team built out that would help me get into a deal that was really, going to put me in a place to succeed, to not have a contractor team in place and some things like that. So I really, I'm grateful for, being able to kind of realize that early on. I could have kept stumbling and been stubborn and kept trying to climb that mountain. Right. But man, I get a lot further faster through aligned partnerships, and same thing on the multifamily stuff. Yeah, I could go try and figure out how to do all that stuff, but man, there's some guys out there that are really, really good at it, and I could just, use them as a team member, and they use me as a investor, and we all walk away happy.
Wins, right. Yeah. And it's, once again, focus on what you're good at, outsource the rest. Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's huge. How many people do you have other than your strategic partnerships, or, you're a limited partner in these deals or whatever, but do you have employees that work with you or for you, or what does your immediate team look like?
Yeah, no, I'm lean and mean, man. So I do have, for the podcast in particular, and then for the rehab project management, I have a VA that helps basically with the back end stuff on the podcast. As you know, there's a lot of moving parts on the flips as well. So, or on the rehab. So the contractors will send in information. We've tried to use Trello and some of those some of those project tools that we find very useful. My partner's not even 30. So for us, it's very simple. Our contractors they just don't get it, So I have them send the progress and the updates to an email. The VA updates Trello, and I'm able to, check on my phone from my desk while I'm eating lunch or something, as we progress. So that's it. I think there's going to be plenty more of that, but, we don't do more than a few, 2 deals at a time right now. So, we're not
Is it all in the Houston market? I was going to ask next about, what do you feel about investing outside of your market? Is everything you have right in town? You can go see it?
It is, yeah. And that's more of a try and get my comfort level and skill set and experience up before I go. There's some interesting people out there who do it from out of state and things with turnkey opportunities and things. Just want to be comfortable that I understand what all's involved in a rehab before I try and talk through it on the phone or through video chat. So,
gosh, no kidding.
Yeah. So all of our stuff it's focused actually, from, downtown Houston to Galveston, which is about an hour away from Houston. So I kind of live in between, and there's just a lot of, single family and residential markets available in that space at all kinds of price points. And there's plenty for us to eat here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Mm-hmm. You're in Texas, man. That might as well be its own country, right?
Yeah. Right.
So that's really interesting. Would you say that where do you see yourself going in the next 5 years? Or where do you really want this to go? I get your reason, your why, right? It's to really help out your mom and to support her and help her to live a great life. And I'm sure you and your family, immediate family, and your brother as well. So what does the next 5 years look like?
Let's see. We're focused on the mortgage note creation. So our goal in 3 years is the 25 notes. It's kind of as far as I've gotten on that. And then, on the, syndication stuff, it's to have, very little in stocks and bonds. We'll still have a little bit that kind of does what it does with compound interest and things like that, but, protected in some low fee management type opportunities. But to have that stuff, the way those things work, there's so much tax benefit to when some of my private investors, when I talk to them at a meetup or something, if they can qualify for accredited status and things like that, there's just, I can't touch that. I mean, you're getting a preferred return, you're getting that deduction on a K1 as a limited partner, and it's, you're splitting equity at the end at this position. So it's a beautiful model. So
It's a
I want to
beautiful
continue.
model.
Yeah, I want to continue to play in that arena, build those relationships, and then when when the next phase of life comes, I want to be able to participate actively in that. I enjoy that. I want to have those relationships established where when the time comes that I can add value as an active investor, I can approach those guys and say, we've got capital in the deal and I can participate and be of value to your team and get involved that way.
Awesome.
Yep.
Well, hey man, that's a great segue kind of into our lightning round. You ready for that?
Yeah, absolutely. Come on.
All right. What is your hashtag invest this tip that you can keep our listeners moving forward?
I'd say two things, be resourceful and keep moving, so it does not always go as planned, as I know many listeners know and live daily, just, you have to be able to just move and shake as life does what it does. It's whether it's a flip or it's a rental property or, you're raising capital and somebody backs out on a deal that you're doing in the multifamily space. There is all the time things are going to happen, and you just got to be able to make it work.
Run with the punches, right? I mean, That's what you have to do.
Absolutely.
Do you have a favorite book you've ever read and what the impact has been for you?
Yeah, kind of cliche, but for me and many others, I know of a guest that you've had on, and certainly some listeners, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, got my mind thinking of how different it is to think, unlike how we've been educated and taught for all these years. I mean, we'll kind of, not to be a conspiracy theorist or something, but man, we are programmed to be robots and cogs in the wheel of the employers out there. And there's plenty of good stuff about that. But at the end of the day, to not have the freedom and control over your future is just scary to me, man. So,
it is.
Yeah.
I think times have really, really changed too. Thinking about my parents when they grew up and even my grandparents or, your grandparents as well, times were a lot different than they are now. With technology the way that it is, you don't have to go work for somebody like we were taught to when we were going through school. I mean, that's the reality of it. So great book. Appreciate you sharing that.
Sure.
I know that we have some similar coaches and mentors, but who's giving you the best advice and what's been that impact?
Yeah, I was thinking about this. So I can't think of a moment where I just ran home and jotted something down that someone told me in a conversation, but something that stuck with me. I think it's Henry Ford that said, whether you think you can or you think you cannot, you are right.
Yep.
And through my first flip and then going through and trying to build some of these other opportunities out, I keep that in the back of my head. I mean, you're absolutely right. If you think you can't do it, you're right, man.
Yep. And it's people that think that way, you can't really tell them, you can't convince them otherwise.
Right. It's
already made up in your head. You're right. You're right either way. That's huge. That's right. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
How do you like to give back?
We do a couple of things. So I was a big basketball fan and player growing up. So I've got a couple of buddies that coach in the area, and they coach in some areas that are, that need some help. The kids need shoes or uniforms or whatever. So we get back to that group. They do a great job just kind of raising young men to become good men, kind of guys that would you'd call after your college graduation even. They establish true relationships with these guys and are good mentors. And then I teach financial literacy through junior achievement once a semester. So again, back to just the disbelief that I had as I began to realize how little I knew and was never talked about in school about anything related to budgeting or tax planning or, just being an adult. You graduate high school and, some math and history and things that don't come in handy.
You're thrown into the world with really they don't teach anything about money.
Right.
Anything. You know, and it's really too bad. So, I really appreciate that. If any of the listeners out there want to get in touch with you and understand more about what you're doing and more about, how they can get involved with you, where can they find you?
Yeah, sure. I appreciate that. So I have a podcast. It's called The Cashflow Hustle. The website's thecashflowhustle.com. On there, we've got some free content, surprisingly named The Ultimate Guide to the Cashflow Hustle. We talk about some of the, 10 steps that you could take active today to put yourself in a position for financial literacy and a life of more fulfillment. And then email jgrimes@thecashflowhustle.com.
Okay. Oh, I appreciate you sharing that. We'll make sure to add that in the show notes. And yeah, cash flow hustle is definitely up your alley, right? I mean, you get your hand in a lot of pots and doing really well. So, hey man, I really appreciate you being here today. Quite the story you got. Quite the story, with your, passing of your father. Once again, I'm really sorry to hear that. But sounds like, you're turning that around and making that as beneficial for the family as possible.
Yeah, man. I really appreciate you having me on, Scott, and giving me the opportunity to talk. Keep up the good work, man.
Hey, you do the same. We'll talk to you real soon. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, man. Bye.